dos Estados sobre intermedialidade e processos criativos. Theodora Skipitares é uma artista interdisciplinar, vinda e diretora de teatro em Nova York, formada como escultora e designer. Ela é autora e diretora de mais de 30 obras performáticas, cada uma com textos documentais, música original, vídeo e mais de 300 bonecos. Artista residente no Teatro La Mama, de Nova York, a senhora Skipitares trabalhou e ensinou classes de mestre na Índia, no Vietnã, em Camboja, Coreia do Sul, África do Sul e Irã, bem como em toda a Europa. Seu trabalho visual foi exibido amplamente nos Estados Unidos, Europa e Ásia, e mais recentemente no Museu Whitney, em Nova York. A senhora Skipitares é professora do Departamento de Educação em Arte e Design do Pratt Institute, no Brooklyn, Nova York, Estados Unidos. Com vocês, então, pela primeira vez no Brasil, Theodora Skipitares. Bem-vinda.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to have been invited to this conference. It's very inspiring, and the variety of approaches to the subject are very interesting to me. In this presentation, I will trace a personal trajectory from visual arts, performance art, toward puppetry and performing objects. I will also focus on a few college puppetry courses in the US, including Pratt Institute, an art academy in Brooklyn, New York. I will also examine the unique process of forging a new community of puppetry artists in New York from a wide range of artistic disciplines. I want to tell you ahead of time that this presentation is a personal presentation of the trajectory of my work, and I'm hoping that it's more than that it's an opening into how we can start to think about this notion of bringing disciplines together into puppetry. Closer to my mouth. Is that good? Okay, good. First and foremost, I am a maker of things with my hands. As I look back on the objects I made as a child, I see myself as a stitcher. My mother and her 4 sisters were expert seamstresses using skills learned in Greece. Either with a sewing machine or a hand needle, I was always creating objects, mostly to put on my body. I believe that geography is a part of destiny, and I'm going to shock you by going back many decades, but in 1970, I moved to New York to study theater design and film. I found myself living in the East Village, a few minutes from a new neighborhood called Soho that was a cluster of storefronts and abandoned factory buildings. Every night after my official education at New York University, I would wander 2 blocks downtown to Soho, where on any night there was a choice of dance, poetry, music, scientific experiments, and performance. This was free, welcoming, and very innovative. This became my night school, my accidental education, and probably was my authentic education. This is where I first saw Gilbert and George, Robert Wilson, Laurie Anderson, Tricia Brown, Vito Acconci. Many of these artists were extending the human body in new ways. After I finished my MFA, I worked briefly as a costume designer. I made a man's suit out of woven newspapers and a servant's costume out of hundreds of tiny pencils, which unfortunately punctured the actor who had to be rushed by the stage manager to the nearest emergency room. My favorite was a dress made out of glass, which weighed 90 pounds. The actress who wore it had to be locked into it every night by 2 assistants, and once dressed, she couldn't move. She had to be carried onto the stage. Slowly, I realized that stage design might not be my profession, and the directors I worked for were beginning to agree. But I kept going to Soho to see what artists were doing in the storefronts. At the time, I didn't understand that these experiments were truly groundbreaking cross-media projects, and that what I was becoming was an interdisciplinary artist. New York City was officially bankrupt, and landlords had abandoned their buildings. I found a very cheap studio, got a job as a waitress, and began making solo autobiographical performances, strongly influenced by this scene of visual performance art, which was driven in part by feminism. Women artists were creating stories about their lives in a variety of media: painting, drawing, sculpture, collage, and especially performance. And they were using their bodies. In my solo works, the objects were the focus, and the other elements of the performance were built around them. The work was about the conflict of growing up as a young, restless woman in a traditional Greek home. The tension between Greek and American culture, especially in terms of female sexuality. I began by making my own walls. I moved across these walls, performing not as an actor, but rather as a stagehand, on stage but invisible. Several years later, I would realize that this particular kind of stage presence, on stage but not the center of attention, is a presence that many puppeteers identify with. At this time, many artists, male and female, who didn't fit neatly into a genre, such as Carolee Schneemann and Joan Jonas, were exploring solo performance. In a few cases, this exploration would lead them to puppetry. Pat Olesko's inflatable objects, Dennis Oppenheim's motorized marionettes, along with Winston Tong's cloth dolls. Something else, however, was clear. For the first time in this form, women were as equally represented as men. I worked for several years as a solo performer. After a while, I felt lonely on stage, and one afternoon, as I looked across my studio, I saw leaning against the wall the few dozen full-body self-portraits I had made out of cast latex from plaster mold. I grabbed one of the portraits, took a saw, made a cut at the shoulder and one at the elbow, and then stitched the pieces back together so they could move in different positions. I tied a string to one of the fingers and then ran the string up to the ceiling and across the wall so I could animate the figure remotely. I incorporated that figure, about 30 inches tall, into my next performance. These realistic representations of myself, which I called Little Theodoras, started to appear on stage with me in supporting roles. At times, there were 300 of them on the stage. Eventually, these took over the performance space. I left the stage to become their director. These small female bodies came to represent women, men, even animals. My puppet figures were gender and species fluid. Soon I left the stage. What I didn't realize immediately was that I had stumbled onto a kind of puppet performance. Autobiography became less important to me as I discovered that these puppets were innocent and neutral and capable of telling the truth in a way that most actors couldn't. They seemed a perfect match for documentary material, whether it was historical, scientific, medical, or breaking news. The puppets, in effect, determined the texts, which were, not surprisingly, fragments of information stitched together in a montage. Brecht's ideas about performing, or at least what I thought I knew about them, were very interesting to me at the time. It was during the 1980s that I first met other artists in New York who were working with puppets. Europe, Asia, and South America have always had a dynamic, experimental approach to contemporary puppetry, but in the US, there wasn't yet a visible experimental movement of contemporary puppet theater. Mabu Mines, with A Prelude to Death in Venice, Hannah Tierney with her String Abstractions, Paul Zaloom by way of bread and puppet theater with hundreds of everyday found objects, Robert Anton, Roman Pasca, and Janie Geiser were part of the New York scene. Some of us were knowledgeable and trained in the craft and traditions of puppetry. Others, like myself, were discovering this world of puppetry for the first time. This state of ignorance changed dramatically for me and many American artists a few years later. So now we come to my second unofficial education. In 1992, the Jim Henson family undertook to present a series of large-scale international puppet festivals that would go on until 2000, that changed the landscape of puppetry in the United States. As a result, during the 1990s, puppetry experienced a golden age. This was my second period of intensive, unofficial training. For a group of young and mid-career artists, this first festival and the following ones would become practically a university course in the creative possibilities of making great theater with puppets, performing objects, and other media. The first Henson Puppet Festival took place at one theater and featured 17 companies from around the world. The festival grew in number from 1994 to 1998, and by the end, they had invited, for the last festival, 26 companies, and it was presented in 11 venues. some of the visiting companies that Cheryl Henson and her family brought to New York reflected important global events. For example, in 1994, just months after Nelson Mandela had taken office and ended apartheid in South Africa, we were introduced to William Kendridge and the Handspring Theater. This was one of the first times Kendridge's work had been seen internationally. At this time, I used a variety of puppet styles: shadow, miniature toy theater, puppets, rod puppets, giant inflatable figures. I was creating large-scale works every year, featuring dozens, even hundreds of projects, puppets. In 1992, I began a relationship with Ellen Stewart's La Mama Experimental Theater Club, where I have presented over 20 works. La Mama has had a long history of supporting puppetry. The backstage entrance of the theater is 2 doors from my front door, making it convenient to load in a show that has dozens of giant puppet figures. Third, unofficial education. From 1999 to 2000, I spent several months in India on a Fulbright fellowship. Straight away, I met one of the most well-known contemporary puppeteers, Dadi Pudamji, as well as Anurupa Roy. Under their guidance, I traveled to different regions and experienced a wide variety of ancient performance forms. These performance forms are marvels of storytelling techniques, often dramatizing segments of the ancient Indian epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. When I returned home to New York in 2000, I realized that I was keenly interested in storytelling for the first time. I decided to go back to my own roots and examine the dramatic literature of ancient Greece. It's ironic that spending time in India led to a focus on Greece. Text was less significant than imagery and music. Composers have always been critical contributors to my plays, and they became more so during this period. In 2004, I was commissioned by 10,000 Things, a theater company in Minneapolis that takes theater to prisons and shelters. I was asked to choose a classic play, something I had never done. After some thought, I selected Euripides' Iphigenia in Aulis. For this project, I decided to create a new kind of puppet, a life-size one-person puppet inspired by Otome Bunraku theater in Japan. I fell in love with this style of puppet, but little did I know that it would engage me for several years. The actor puppeteer would be the voice of the character, not unlike the masked actor in ancient Greek plays. First video.
If you choose me, I will make you emperor of all of Asia. Paris, close your ears to her voice and attend to me, Athena. Choose me, and I will make you the wisest man alive and victorious in all your battles. Darling Paris, I declare that you are the most handsome fellow I've seen in years. Of course, the apple belongs to me, Aphrodite, because I know what you want. Why not move to some rich city and lead a more interesting life? You deserve to marry the most beautiful woman on earth, Queen Helen of Sparta. One look at you, and I will make her fall so deep in love that she won't mind leaving her husband, her palace, her family, everything.
Sorry, we had a technical difficulty and I cannot show you the clip that shows the Otomi Bunraku production, the Women of Troy. So, even though I've created 27 full-length works, my most recent ones are inspired by actual plays. My most remarkable experience with writing came in 2009 when I was creating a performance based on Trojan women. I had found parallels between the four characters of Euripides, Helen, Hecuba, Andromache, and Cassandra, and four contemporary international activists, two from Zimbabwe, one from Kenya, and one from Afghanistan. As I researched these contemporary women, I realized that their lives were more compelling, more heroic, and more urgent than those of the Trojan women, and I wondered how I could emphasize that. I came upon the idea of creating four giant 13-foot puppets who were the contemporary heroes. These giants had tent-like bodies that the life-size Greek characters could use for their entrances and exits. By making the four contemporary activists gigantic, I had automatically given their voices importance and power. They had become the lens through which to understand Euripides' women. I had discovered the use of scale as a playwriting tool. In 2014, I stopped adapting Greek plays and moved on to examining absurdist plays. I was especially drawn to UNESCO's The Chairs. Sorry, that's a chorus from one of the Greek plays. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's go back. So those are the 4 giant women, the activists, and they were 13 feet tall. This is from The Chairs. UNESCO rejects a conventional storyline and depicts a world with mechanical, puppet-like characters who speak in non sequiturs. My adaptation of the play became more of a response to UNESCO, or actually a demolition of his play. I did away with almost all the text and reduced the elderly couple to a 10-foot old woman. I created 26 unique performing object chairs, and instead of making the characters invisible, as UNESCO does, I gave each chair the story of a real-life person, either someone I had interviewed personally or read about. Judith Molina, a founder of the Living Theater, was the voice of the old woman. This past year, 2 things happened. First, I was struggling to express the stories of some of the men and women killed by police violence in the U.S. Pressing national dialogue had been sparked by citizens videotaping incidents and the release of police videos in the media and online. Second, I began to study bookmaking. Within a couple of weeks, something clicked. I started making what I call performing books, objects that unfold in time. I'm at the edge of a major new phase of work in which the actor manipulator narrates the story while opening a 3D animated book. My most recent play, There's Blood at the Wedding, uses 6 giant pop-up book constructions which offer reflections on the lives and deaths of 6 American victims of police violence. Skip Shirey composes and performs original songs and music. Fragments of Lorca's masterpiece, Blood Wedding, connect a circle of mothers, the mothers of the American victims, and the grieving mothers of the classic Spanish play. I'd like to show you a clip now from There's Blood at the Wedding. All the text comes from newspaper articles, police reports. It's all documentary material.
devoted to pictures of the car, and not just the blood splatter and the bullet holes through the seatbelt. So the thing in the car. Theodora was shot in the hallway of his lost apartment. The police mistook him for a serial killer.
Theodora has led a quiet, peaceful life during his 2.5 years in the U.S.
No criminal record, not even the previously. I figured out a black man, and things were moving quickly. Officers seem to take anything for a gun.
And what can I say about Sandy? My God, when she started to sing on YouTube, she found her niche. She found what it was she really wanted to do. I'm a possibility. I already knew you. I bought a house. I'm planting roots here to make sure no one else dies in this camp. You won't do this to anyone else's business.
Good morning, my king and queen. It's time, y'all. It's time. This thing I'm holding in my hand, this phone, this camera, it is quite powerful. Social media is powerful. We can do something with it. If we want to change, we can really, truly make it happen.
Get out of the car.
Under arrest for what?
I'm going to light you up.
Failure to signal. You're doing all this for failure to signal. Thank you for reporting. He slammed my fucking head into the ground.
This is the book of Sandra. When you left the club, you didn't know we were going to talk. Dreaming, wondering, doing, one widow, two of them. 50 shots, 6 cops, 50 people witnessed it. 3 cops indicted, 3 cops acquitted. 3 men, 1 murder, 2 wounded, no evidence. 1 widow, 2 orphans. 50 shots, 6 cops, 40-year-old Australian meditation teacher was shot and killed by Lionel Moore, a Minneapolis police officer. Damon had called 911 2 times, 8 minutes apart, late that evening, reporting that she thought she heard a woman being raped. Damon, who was engaged to a U.S. citizen, Don Damon, had already adopted his last name and was busy preparing for her August wedding in Hawaii. But she was home alone that Saturday night, when she became spooked by noises coming from behind the couple's home. She called her fiancé, who told her to call 911. Damon approached the driver's side window in her pajamas. Officer Nora discharged his weapon, striking Damon through the open driver's side window. There was no evidence nor encountered threat that justified his decision to use deadly force. It's the use of force so beyond the pale that would cause other people not to call the police. Everybody loves Eric Garner on stage. He was ready to fight, try and keep the lock on Eric Garner. He was a peacemaker. He was a big guy, 6'3", at 395 pounds. Everybody else has one story. He occupied an entire round. And he would hold the thing up. And he would eat it, standing up, like it was a taco.
On July 17th, 2014, doctors from Price Barker told that he was being harassed.
Every time he tried to get his job, that's what I'm out of my business, officer. I'm out of my business. Please just leave me alone. Just don't touch me.
Numerous officers wants to hold Barker down and handcuffed him. Officer Miguel released his neck hold after a few seconds, but Barker repeated 11 times. I can't breathe.
I'm 61 years old. I've seen it, I've smelled it, I've heard it. You see exactly what these motherfuckers think about us. Now you know what these motherfuckers think about us. They're gonna kill us as long as we sit down and take it. We are the real mothers and we don't give a fuck. We're all alive right now. We're gonna break it. You can't run, you can't hide. Hands up, or arms by your side. Feel my child on the beat in the night in the phone. So they cannot die. Once I put my baby in the ground, I was ready. My heart still breaks, but the beat stays steady. Once I put my baby in the ground, I was ready. My heart still breaks, but the beat steady. Once I put my baby in the ground, I was ready. My heart still breaks, but the beat stays steady. Once I put my baby in the ground, I was ready. My heart still breaks, but the beat steady. Steady, 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 steady.
Now you know what those motherfuckers think of us. They're gonna kill us as long as we sit down and take it. We are the real mothers and we don't give a fuck. We're going live right now. We're gonna break it. We can't run. We can't hide. Hands up. Or arms by your side. Feel my child like a thief in the night. Feel the fallen one. So we do not die. Once we put our baby in the ground, we will ready. Our hearts don't break, but the beat stays steady. We are 50 mothers and 500 mothers and 5,000 mothers and again and again and 1 million mothers and 5 billion mothers and we will live forever, but you'll never see the end. 50 mothers and 500 mothers and 5,000 mothers and again and again and when we put our baby in the ground, we will ready. Our hearts still break, but the beat stays. Now you know what those motherfuckers think of us.
They're gonna kill us as long as we sit down and take it.
We are the real mothers and we don't give a fuck. We're going live right now. We're gonna break it.
Even after running
Now I would like to focus on my experience as an educator with training in the U.S. There are only a very few colleges or universities that offer a several-year concentration in puppetry. The University of Connecticut at Storrs, directed by Rocco Burton, is the most well-known, offering both a BFA and an MFA. Recently, it has begun to offer a 12-credit online graduate certificate. I believe that starts this fall. Here are some images from his students. Sarah Lawrence, an East Coast private college, offers a year course in puppetry under the direction of Dan Hurlin. This course is inside of the theater and dance department. Dan Hurlin's work has been seen internationally. Several of his students come to New York City after they graduate and become part of the ever-growing fluid puppetry community. That's one of his student works. That's another. Janie Geiser is the head of the Department of Puppetry. It's actually a course inside of scenography at CalArts on the West Coast. That's some of her work. Students' work. And then these are my students. My students come to my year-long class from many different disciplines: animation, art therapy, graphic design, sculpture, art history, painting, drawing, illustration. My course is held for 30 weeks, and I move through several short performance assignments. In a 30-week period, the students create 15 to 20 short works in a variety of styles and mediums. We are always referencing contemporary visual and performance artists. What happens to a student in the US after they complete a puppetry course in one of the colleges? This is the fourth example of unofficial education. Some of the young puppeteers persist and become part of a growing community of artists where there's a very small amount of financial support. There are a few that secure great jobs in film and TV. Several students from the University of Connecticut actually train for film and TV work. For others who want to work individually and experimentally, there are a few brave nonprofit institutions, most of them in Manhattan and Brooklyn, that offer the next level of experience. So here Center for the Arts has artist residencies. St. Anne's Warehouse has a year-long artist residency. 5 Miles is a gallery that presents puppetry, does not have a residency. And La Mama presents a good amount of puppetry, but they are not a residency. Here's an example of one of the works that came from a residency at Here. It's called Chimpanzee, and it's one puppet on a table. I think that duck is the only other object that he encounters. It's a beautiful piece. It took 7 years to produce, and it's now going to begin touring. And this other piece was also done at Here. and it also took about 7 years to create. What else can I say? Oh, concluding. So in concluding, it seems that many young American puppeteers have to be very flexible about how they get their training. I can't help but go back to my student days when I was making sets and costumes by day and then running every night to Soho to see what was my real thrilling education at night. For many of us, for better or for worse, it's often a self-styled, improvised process to dig deeper into the art form of puppetry. The positive aspect of this is that we are exposed to many different exciting art forms in New York City, so this has a positive effect. Of course, the downside is obvious. It takes a long time to make work. You need to have jobs doing other things, and it's a pretty insecure existence. That's it.
Obrigado, Theodora. Bom, depois dessa fala super inspiradora, a gente vai dedicar 1 hora para perguntas para Theodora Skipitares e depois a gente faz o encerramento daqui a 1 hora, então. Então, microfone, tem um microfone, o meu, tem um microfone que vai circular e, como você já sabe.
Sorry for my English, you know. In your work in the police cases, these were performance one after the other, or different performances? Each case was one.
Oh, 6 cases in one show.
In only one show. And another question. In UNESCO's piece, the voice of Judith Malina, yes, was she said all the text of UNESCO. There was a dramaturgy.
She said all the text,
Yes,
but it was a very reduced text.
yes. And you told that there were little personal experiences.
Yeah. With the
Okay. Could you
chairs.
explain again the chairs, and I want to understand. The voice of Judith Malina was only UNESCO, and these cases, the text were yours.
Two other narrators.
Yes.
I interviewed people,
Yes.
26 people,
That's the
and
question.
yeah, and they told a story.
Yes, and the objects were moving. No.
They were chairs.
Yes.
They were actual chairs.
Or was an in installation. They don't move.
They did move. They were puppets.
Okay.
They had moving parts.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Theodora, I have a question about your work is intensely personal, and a lot of it is derived, and you go through and develop everything yourself. How did you learn to direct? Did you do this by watching other people, or was this experimentation? And what are some of how did
okay.
you see your role in this, in
Okay.
directing your work with somebody else on stage?
All right. I think the first step was in being fortunate enough to find this community where art was being broken and remade, and that the rules were very, very open. So I saw that part was very positive and got me in there. And then there were so many great works that I saw that changed my life little by little. And then I actually did work for certain theater companies that were happening then. I worked with Richard Schechner. I worked with the Wooster Group. I really worked a lot with theater companies as well. But I think the most important thing was that I found my own way to something that was theater, but I didn't know it or directing, and I didn't know it at the time. And I think being a visual artist, we who are visual artists, and there are a lot of us now who are directing, we're so fundamentally tuned to spatial relationships and rhythmic relationships that those are the components, I believe, of directing.
Hi. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for sharing with us pieces of this wonderful trajectory. One of the main things that you said over your speech that touched me the most was about what you said about unofficial training, unofficial formation. And and you're also a teacher.
Right.
And I would like to know how you see the mixing of these both perspectives in learning. What are they? Are they complementary? Is one more important than the other? How do you understand of these two perspectives?
The differences between official training and unofficial
yes.
training?
Perfect.
Well, I think that my students are very skilled in other disciplines, and they come to take a puppetry course and they don't know anything at all. So I think that in a way my assignments are really structured and they're fast, because you have to remember when you're an undergraduate or a graduate, you can work really fast. So fast sort of fools you and takes you out of your fear, because you have to do something really quickly. And I make the assignments very different from one another, but we do cover a variety of puppet styles. But I think that speed and a certain environment of trust that I set up, and frankly, sometimes very imaginative assignments that don't appear to you to what they are until they reveal themselves. I don't know. What else can I say?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
Bom, eu me identifiquei quando dizes que é uma fazedora de coisas com as mãos, porque é isso que eu sou também. Também aprendi a costurar com a minha mãe, trabalhar com madeira com meu pai, mas não sou um performer, não sou um diretor, apenas faço objetos, bonecos, coisas assim. Senti um pouco de falta no evento de oficinas de construção, e eu queria saber como é o teu espaço de construção, que ferramentas tem, que materiais, como que ele é...
Slow down.
Quando o aluno chega, o que ele encontra de material e ferramentas, máquinas para trabalhar de fato?
For the first part of the course, students bring their own skills and their own materials. So what's great about that is that there's a variety of approaches. Architects come to take the class, interior designers. So there's a wide range of materials possibilities. Because I come from a sculpture background, I work very much three-dimensionally. That's what we work in. So when we are working on rod puppets, for example, or puppet heads, we pretty much work with clay, paper. Some people bring in plastic printed objects, but we work with basics that I've seen here. Does that answer the question?
Do início do seu trabalho, nos anos 70, do início do seu trabalho nos anos 70, do início do seu trabalho nos anos 70 até a atualidade, ok, falando, oi, oi, foi, oi. Do início dos anos 70, no início do seu trabalho, não? Alô. Oi, gente. Tudo bem aí? Não, não é 13. É um outro. Volta. Senão eu vou me perder. Do início dos anos 70, quando você começou a trabalhar para a atualidade, todas essas questões de ativismo político e de questões que envolvem a mulher, as questões de racismo, etc. Quando você retira os elementos das novas tecnologias, que novos elementos narrativos e diferentes do início da sua carreira para agora? Elementos narrativos e formas de contar, ways to tell.
I believe that I've always been employing methods of montage or collage. So, and as I said before, when I came back from India and began the 14-year period of doing Greek works, I became very interested in storytelling, but I had not been interested in storytelling before. And I'm still probably not a great storyteller. I think I'm more interested in how one piece of something sits next to something and behind something and on top of something. So I think I'm very much into layered narrative and collage narrative.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that, the thing you show us. I want to ask you if some young director want to start with his project and ask to you what kind of advice could you do to him if he doesn't learn in any university or any academy? What do you say to him?
Well, first I would find out what their financial situation is. And if they can afford, do they have to work 40 hours a week? Can they work 20 hours a week? So, and if they can work, say, 20 hours a week to make their living, I would suggest that they get a space where they can create. And if they have time, if they're young and very healthy and they have time, and they just go to an empty room and they start to think, but they also start to see everything possible. So I would give them a list of like 300 videos to watch. I would tell them what art exhibitions to go to. I would be available to them, but I think that kind of thing as the start.
Tá bom, bem lentamente. Eu queria que você... Oi. Eu queria que você comentasse um pouco como vocês chegaram no modelo pop-up. Pop-up. The book. Pop-up. E como que você entende esse... É um cenário animado? Como é que você entende a relação do pop-up na cena? Como chegou até ele, como você entende ele na cena? E uma outra questão que é... Queria que você comentasse como funcionam as residências, como que funciona essa lista que você mostrou no último...
Okay, two very different questions, yeah.
Sim, totalmente.
Okay, so I believe that I found...
Wait. I have another question.
I believe that I have found tricky ways to not write a conventional text. So when I told you about the giant puppets that became important because they were 4 meters tall, that was a way that I kind of wrote strong characters, but it was not a typical playwriting tool. So I was struggling last year with how to tell the story of the police victims, and I was looking for a text, and I was looking for a storytelling method. And somehow I figured that the books could be a script writing exercise. Okay, and the second question about residencies. So residencies, the few that exist in New York are really good. And for example, they're competitive. So maybe 200 people apply and maybe 9 people get chosen. And then you meet once a week with a mentor, and you meet for 1 year, and it's a really great process. And it's definitely a process for someone who's a rather mature young artist. But they work very well. It's just there are very few of them, and they don't pay you anything. You go there free, you know.
É muito interessante ver a produtividade da tua carreira durante todos esses anos, mas eu gostaria que tu comentasse um pouco sobre os fracassos que tu teve e aonde eles te levaram.
There have been many. You know, Financial stability has always been really, really tough. And the great thing about my teaching, which I started rather late in life, I started teaching when I was 58. Before that, I was a freelance artist who always had insecurity financially. So I'm very happy that I've always been able to do my work, but of course I could have done my work. I can do my work much more spectacularly with more funds and more support. Yes, so teaching was great for me, and it nourished me, but also it gave me financial stability, which I had not had for so long. So that was a very wonderful thing that happened to me.
Você falou do seu trabalho relacionado às questões de gênero, às questões dos direitos civis, dos direitos das comunidades negras. E, nesse momento, nós estamos passando no Brasil, né, por uma situação bastante complicada, que é vários tipos de censura a esse tipo de expressão, e aos jovens artistas, né, que estão se expressando dessa maneira. Então, eu queria duas questões. Uma, se você passou por essa experiência na sua carreira, e o que você diria para esses jovens artistas que hoje estão passando por essas situações em contextos, né, em vários contextos?
So there are different kinds of censorship. There's censorship when you're actually stopped from doing your work, but there's also censorship when no one wants to support your work and your work requires money. Right now in New York, because there's so little money for the arts, there are terrific young artists just working on their own and doing very brave work that has to do with gender and other political issues. New York has become a very, very expensive place to work. So that's, that's a problem. So that's another kind of censorship. So I would say, young artists in New York, they live 6 in an apartment together, and their energy is great and their bravery is great, but how long is that going to last? I don't know. There'll be a wave. It'll be in a cycle. But so those are the kinds of censorship that we experience when there's no money for your work, or your work is not considered important. This happened to so many women artists in the past, as well as actually government censorship. So.
Hi, Theodora. So I was lucky enough to see There's Blood at the Wedding in La Mama, which was fantastic production. Thank you. And I wanted to ask if any of the family of the victims had a chance to see the performance, and if you can say something about that.
I worked with 2 of the mothers, and especially one of them, Eric Garner's mother, the yellow book here. He was the man who was choked. I can't breathe. I'm still in touch with his mother. She came to rehearsals, and she was so happy with what we were doing. It was great.
I wanted to ask about the performance she talked about, how the government reacted to it, and if there was any reaction from the police department or whoever watched it, what their reactions were, and what that resulted in, politically speaking.
So you're saying, did my production have any? No, it did. I tell you the one thing though, I could tell some of the reviewers were really uncomfortable with the fact that I was dealing with this material in a very in-your-face way, without poetry or subtlety or something. I was aware of that, but no one from the police department is going to come to my work. Okay.
I wanted to ask if has it ever interested you, or did you ever consider going out of the theater and working outside in the street or doing outdoor performances?
Yes. My next project is, there's a tradition in the south of the US and also in urban areas of African American marching bands. And they're probably they come from probably Brazilian drumming bands. But I am planning an outdoor play that's a parade that's with an African American marching band in Brooklyn. So I think that will happen in about a year.
Theodora, muito obrigado pela sua presença aqui hoje. Eu queria agradecer também a presença de vocês, dizer que essa fala foi extremamente inspiradora. Você está convidada, you come back to return to Brazil, para conhecer tantas contradições, tantos conflitos, tais quais esses que a gente viu aqui, e que ela possa também refletir sobre essa realidade. Bom, gente, muito obrigado. Daqui a 1 hora, mais ou menos, a gente tem uma apresentação, a Beat-Me, da Carolina Garcia, no espaço 2, às 20 horas. Às 20 horas. A programação continua amanhã. Muito obrigado, boa noite, até a próxima.